Hello and welcome to Springboard with Virtual University. My name is Albert Ocran, welcoming you on behalf of Team Springboard. This is your most inspirational show and that place where the greatest minds in the world converge. Springboard is brought to you by the Springboard Roadshow Foundation and proudly sponsored by MTN, the Enterprise Group, with media support from the Multimedia Group and the Graphic Communications Group. So today we are back exploring the big question that this season is asking us. And it's about finding yourself. And by the way, where are you? Finding yourself. What does it take to find yourself? How do you come to that place of great conviction where you say, I am? To help us in today's discussion, I have a great friend of ours here at Springboard, a marketing and brands consultant, Jesse Agyepong. Jesse, good to see you.
Good to see you, sir. Good to see you, big bro.
It's a blessing to finally get to have this conversation.
Excited to be here.
How big is the question of finding yourself? Why is it important to the individual and to the professional?
I think for me, I would answer it from a state of confusion. I was privileged to have been hosted by Madam Comfort a couple of months ago. And we spoke about social capital and how to survive within that capital. Finding yourself is probably also as confusing as that. And I will take this conversation back to our upbringing and our growth as a people. Personally, I grew up in Bubuashi. So my worldview was weaved around that. So finding myself started from that background of deciding what options were available to me. Clearly, you can't find yourself in a place that you don't exist. Yourself in a place where you have no understanding or knowledge of. So you need to first find yourself within a place where you understand. So to answer the question, confusion is the first stage to break out of. I've always said that before you think outside of the box, understand how to think within the box before you jump out of it. So my confusion started with whether I felt that I wanted to be a taxi driver, as an example, because my worldview had presented me with that limitation. Then as the world moved on, my confusion was whether I wanted to be an accountant, because again, I had been inspired by senior brotherism. Then again, my worldview changed and I realized that I could be inspired by movies. And therefore I felt the legal fraternity might be a way for me to path my career. Then again, I was inspired when I got into university, where I felt that maybe communication might be a thing for me. So finding yourself is about weaving through a confusing maze. And each time you turn, presenting you with options worth considering. But the question is, which one do you consider? And typically for many of us, it's been driven by the circumstances of the time, has depicted what our options are. Now, I give you a classical example. At some point, I was very specific that I would want to be an investment lawyer. And so I signed up to the University of London Center for Finance and Financial Management. And I started a program with a clear path that I wanted to be an investment lawyer. I started a program. I failed the courses with Science and Wonders. Completely. It was a disaster for me. So
I'm trying hard not to laugh at the Science and Wonders bit is very special.
And I was clear in my mind.
Why?
I guess for me, there were two parts of it. The first was I was reading Greek. Either my mind couldn't process the language, or my mind couldn't process the technicality, or my heart wasn't in it. Because as at that time, my mental appreciation of communication, of brands, of marketing, of problem solving was also being curated nicely. So I had to do the obvious, to abandon my first path and jumping onto the second path.
So were these like two competing interests?
Completely. But later I would come to the conclusion that there were similarities. But once I perceived as at that time that it was a difficulty, I had to jump. I guess the point that I'm making is finding yourself would present you with some of the most complex things to consider.
Would you say that this confusion that you described, I mean, I've heard different words being used in previous conversations: journey, curiosity, experimentation. You are very blunt. You call it confusion. This confusion that you describe, would you say that it's in the majority of life stories of people who eventually find themselves? And in that, and a follow-up, doesn't make it a good thing or a bad thing?
I think for me, it was a good thing. How did I fixate myself on finding myself? My considerations were first economic. So before you consider the big picture of who you have to be, you need to answer the basic question of how do I survive? And in survive, you will create options for yourself. As an example, I think I'm a good driver because you got to pay your fees or you got to feed your family. So at some point you would say, I found myself. But that finding yourself is just, somebody might say, happenstantial. So it's happening within economic consideration. So suddenly somebody gave you a bus and you realize that the bus is better than the taxi. And somebody tells you that, I will pay for your fees to go to pilot school. Say, I found myself. Exactly. So I feel that the first level for finding yourself, for many of us living on this side, might be economic consideration. Unless you've got a godfather ahead of you who says that, look, this is the career path for you. So I would open every door for you before you knock it. Now, beyond economic consideration is where you probably feel that, where I am now is not about bread and beans or brick and mortar issues, but now I am mentally settled to a point where I can make different options available to me. Then you can move into your social identification, because now the broke identification or the economic identification is out of the window. And suddenly, as was in my case, the options now changed into whether I wanted to be a lawyer, and there was more certainty around it. Being an accountant had been relegated to the background completely. I no longer wanted to do debit the receiver and credit the giver. Marketing was at the forefront of it now. Brand building was at the forefront of it now. And politics had come to the forefront of it now. And I realized that underpinning all of these things were a couple of things. One, the power of persuasion. Two, the power of communication. And three, the power of brand building. And once I found the commonality in all of them, I knew that I was home.
And Jesse, for you, the word is home. I like the way you say it. I knew I was home.
Yes.
Now, in the quest to arrive at home, or what Maslow calls the self-actualization for just purposes of comparison,
Yes.
I almost get a sense that what you described from the start as potentially a taxi driver and then the exploration, drop this, add this, switch to this, and then finally where you think this is me, almost sounds like the natural progression in Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
From survival, which was the first point you mentioned, through safety, love and belonging, esteem, and then finally home or self-actualization. Is there a correlation between the two?
Well, I perfectly agree. So I merged the first two stages of Maslow, and I treated it as economic consideration. Because there are times when maybe you find, and I give a classical example. When I was working in Kinafama as a national service person, I liked the environment. And I was drawn to my first boss, Nuyama Ishan Fameye.
Great guy. I've known him since childhood.
Yeah.
We went to the same primary school together. So
Interesting.
All my life.
Interesting.
We are related.
I have weird stories about him.
We'll talk about it.
When I worked in Kinafama, it was clear in my mind that in 20 years' time, I would own multiple pharmacy shops across the country. And I knew that I wanted to go to school to understand it. But I guess it was based on where you are. It's possible that if I had charted that path, maybe I would have been a very rich person by now, richer than this. But maybe I probably would have left so many things undone. And so you're right. The first two levels are economic in nature. Survive and build your future from a survival point of view. And as you go through school, you finish your university, you start work, you meet new people. The broke and the rich converge at some point in life. You listen to the conversations and you realize that there's really opportunity here. These guys are looking for this. These jobs pay more. wow, this gives you access to the United Nations. This gives you access to this. And in all of those periods, my job was to assess myself to answer one question. If I find myself in that room, why would people stop to listen to me? And if I'm not a debit the receiver, credit the giver guy, and I'm not the one who would say, invest your money in the stock exchange, and I cannot make sense on why this culture is better than this culture, then why should I be in that room? So to answer that question was to build myself in retrospect on a path. So even if you're a pharmacy shop person, you know your communication is clear, it's there. When you find yourself working in a carpentry place, you know your power of persuasion is very, very apt. When you move yourself into a church environment, you know your power of mobilization is very, very apt. So by the time you get to the final point of socialization, connecting to the global world, you're clear in your mind that really, this is it. And I have to harness it and make sense of it.
Where is talent in all this conversation? Are there natural abilities that make it easier for you to draw that kind of conclusion? Because it's interesting that you talk about, I won't use the word dismiss, but you carefully lay aside, because if I don't say it, well, I'll get a call from Charles Mensa.
Yes.
Your big brother will call me. So you respectfully lay aside accounting, or what you call debit and credit, and say, that's not me.
That's not me, yes.
But somebody else too will carefully put that in front of them and say, I live, sleep, eat, and drink numbers.
Yes.
What is it that makes one person say, this is me, and feel very contented to say that, and another person say, this is me, and this is not me, and say it with such clarity? Is there a correlation with talent or natural ability?
And back in university, Legon, everybody is giving lots of courses. I was lucky to have been given political science, sociology, linguistics, drama, everything else. Lots. But one of the things that to answer this question, I just want to dive into sociology a little bit.
I did sociology actually.
Fantastic.
Minor needs.
One of the most exciting topics for me was the chaos between nature and nurture. And for me, listening as at the time, I was really drawn to the nature bit. That some things are innately inherent. That by your very nature and your very existence as a child growing up, there are things that come easy to you. So if there are 5 kids at home and the mother wants something, she will know which of the kids to call to do it, because your upbringing, they can see what you might be good at. Somebody might be very careless, somebody might be very careful and things like that. So I was typically at that time drawn to the nature concept. And I believed at that time that I could see myself inherently owning something. But the more I grew up, the more I realized that some of the things that I feel that I was inherently gifted with may have also been influenced to me indirectly or unknowingly. So to your question, it's very possible that there are people who believe that they have an innate predisposition to confidently persuade people to chart a path. Then there are those also who would study the art of persuasion, who might be influenced by books and by other motivational speakers. I was listening to a chap who said that he used to listen to his favorite pastor 8 hours a day. And if you listen to somebody 8 hours a day, you probably might pick up so much more from words, from tonations, from presentations, from confidence. You'll pick a lot. So yes, to your question, there are those who would pick strength from the point of their inherent abilities. And there are those who would pick because their social capital is strong enough for them to learn on the go. So both actually will bring you to the same place. You decide which part of the coin you pursue depending on where it lands.
Will I be right in breaking the original thought that I threw at you into 3 now?
Okay.
You are saying there's the nature part where you can say you were born with it.
Yes.
It is inherent at birth. Then you see there's also the socialization where it is by observation, by imitation, by learning, by watching others do. And that also is where the social influence comes in.
Yes.
Then the third part will be by practice, where you say, I love this thing and I'll start from scratch and do it until I become very good at it.
Yes.
In your case,
Yes.
which of these three has been the most powerful influence?
So let me start from the first one. Jessy has always been, so I used to be a stammerer. So I had to try and fight my way out of it. So from, even as kids, it would always be said that, Kwame Pekasa, Lord Pekasa, and Lord is my senior brother, and Charles is like the bridge between the two of us. So talking, speaking, defending people, that's ability within me to attempt to speak for people or to help people has always been something that I found easy to do.
Great.
But that's just basic. So again, if your worldview is limited to understanding how to pull a sesegba for somebody, and suddenly you walk into Oka Deco and there are buttons on the chair, you won't know what to do with it. So the second phase was also through observation. And I gave you a classical example of Mr. Miyameshan Fanfameye. And I think my foundation was, let's say, 30% built by him. Stickler for time, committed to projects, seeing things all the way through, and care for people. Most importantly, he was a leader who appreciated candid conversation, not blabbing, candid. And he loved to work. He loved to work. So I remember Nehemiah would call me. They would call me early in the morning around 5:30, and he would say,
very early riser.
Very early, like 5 o'clock, 5:30.
Early sleeper.
And then he would say, Ada, Messenyo, what's a Mijano Gate and Bessenyan. And I'm saying, bro, who does that?
Who does that?
Exactly. So that kind of discipline Nehemiah put within me. I would travel to Kumasi with Nehemiah to go and watch Kenafama Premier League. We'd have a good time on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're coming back on Monday. And we are playing good music and talking and talking. I used to be his assistant. And suddenly Joy FM would say, Joy News at 8. And we'll listen to the news. And when we finish, he'll turn off the radio. He would say, where's my report for last week? And I'll say, bro, I've been with you. But no. And I would receive the beating of my life. The following week, I traveled with him to Kwando. Kwando House of Lions versus Kotoko, I think. We finished, we enjoyed on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. By Sunday midnight, I picked the phone. I called every sales director across the country. I said, what was your target? 10. What was your actual? 5. We sat in the car. We're driving. He was playing 50 cents at that time. Good music. And Joy FM came through. What was the results for last week? And I gave it to him. He never did that again. He had to teach me through examples. So those were part of the learning curves for me to understand that your ability to speak means nothing if you cannot deliver the results people expect of you.
Charlie, stay there. Stay on this point. If I brought my wallet into the studio, you would have end yourself. No, stay with this point. And I'm sure every CEO listening, every head pastor listening, everyone who oversees people listening is clapping for you at this point. Please stay with the same point and just say it one more time for
your ability to deliver.
When it's nice, you play it twice.
Your ability to deliver means nothing.
To speak means nothing.
It means nothing if you cannot fulfill it at the time of need. So I've always, one of the most powerful brand quotations that I've been used to is a brand is a promise fulfilled. So if you are a brand called Reverend Albert Ocran, powerful brand that Zambia has heard of, and a certain Reverend Ocran lands in Zambia, and he fails to deliver in Zambia, the brand would be dented. So when the opportunity is given, we deliver it. And that's how I build upon one thing after the other,
You've touched on the nature part.
Yes.
A stammerer, but loves to speak.
Yes.
Especially advocacy or defending those that you feel have been unfairly treated. Then it moves on to socialization.
Yes.
By observation, by mentoring, seeing your boss show you the way, and imbibing it and acting it out. Let's shift a bit further into the nurture, the hard hours of perfecting something so that you can build a brand that will stand the test of time. Let's talk about that part.
Let me give you very radical ones. In secondary school, I was trying to learn how to code, and you need to wait a long time to touch the computer. So I never got to touch it. In university, I wasn't very big on computing stuff. And even if I had access to it, all I did was to browse the internet and look for what young people used to look at. And it didn't help me much. Then I finished and I started working in Kinafama. And first time I walked into Kinafama as a national service person, Nema says to me that there's a backlog of data that has to be analyzed. I was given multiple boxes stuck in a room. He says, I want a report generated from this in 1 month. And Nema is those people who just close the door and leave. He said it. I used to work 15 hours a day. 15 dedicated hours. My perfection of Excel as a Microsoft tool came from being dumped in the room and locked up. My conversion of that data into a report came from being locked up in that room. Wearing those that I used to wear yellow shirt, yellow tie, red shirt, red tie, green shirt, green tie. I mean, where that came from, I have no idea. But it was so exciting. And I learned it. Sat behind Excel, picked the invoices, put the date in there. 1 waha, 2 waha. How do I add it? Then I'll try it. And then somebody will say, it's equal to 2 plus 2. I put in the hours to make it work. So that's one way of being practical on ground. In terms of public speaking, I'd followed Les Brown a lot. Some time ago, you and I had met at a program, I think at a church in Tema or so. And I felt that my style of public speaking, I cannot speak like Reverend Albert Ocran, because you are different. You are meticulous. You are very A to B to C to D. Les Brown can be A to Z, back to B, back to Q.
Yeah.
So he speaks like that. Mensah Otabil, pastor it's also very A to B to C to D. It's very, I was like, I can't do that. So who can I be like? Then I had to go into an observation mode to decide which of the great public speakers can connect me to what really is innate in me. So I had to also observe him, see how he did his stuff, and follow suit. So I'll just give you 2 examples of how I had to build on the talent by practically working it and by also practically observing people. I remember when some years ago, Pastor Mumba came to Ghana.
Neves Mumba, yeah.
A powerful guy. And he spoke about choosing a drum major. And then the second message was choosing a platform. So you and I have spoken about nurture. We've spoken about nurturing. But the question is, so what? So I'm a gifted public speaker and I've learned from society. If I identify myself and I'm not choosing as a band major, then what am I doing with the talent I have? And if I also don't choose the right platform, and I remember the example he had given, the example was, if you're a great singer and you're singing in your bedroom, who cares? So I had to be seen. So the talent in me, when I felt it was ready, I had to force my way in life.
When I come back from this break, we'll talk about how do you force your way in life.
Yes.
So by courtesy of nature, by courtesy of socialization or mentoring, and then a bit of your own hard work and being locked in a room with a yellow tie, yellow shirt, or red shirt, red tie, you put in the hard hours to master the craft.
Yeah.
How do you force your way into, in quotes, to be seen so that you can get rewarded for your effort? And then, by the way, that man you eulogize today as your mentor who pointed you to the future, at the time he was doing it, was he still your favorite person, or you hated him from the bottom of your heart? We'll talk about that. Those tough conversations that we don't have very often when I come back from this break. In case you stumbled upon this is Springboard Virtual University and my guest, Jesse Agyepong, brands and marketing consultant, just talking about finding yourself. Very interesting conversation. Let me give you the enterprise advantage tip that today focuses on grasping waiting periods in insurance. So the question for the day is, what is a waiting period in insurance policies? It's a very important question, so please note the answer. So waiting periods are durations before certain coverages become effective. Before the referee whistles, it's a waiting period. They say the match has started, but it's a waiting period. And then understanding waiting periods helps in managing expectations regarding coverage start dates. Anything that happens between is not covered. So please take note of that. This tip is brought to you by Enterprise Group. The number to call 030-263-4777. Email info@myenterprisegroup.io. Enterprise, your advantage. Springboard is brought to you by the Springboard Roadshow Foundation and proudly sponsored by MTN Ghana and the Enterprise Group with media support from the Multimedia Group and the Graphic Communications Group. Let's talk after this break.
Hello? Bye.
Well, everybody's heard about the bird. Bird, bird, bird is the word. Bird, bird is the word. Well, don't you know about the bird? Well, everybody knows that the bird is the word. Bird, bird is the word.
To consider the implications.
Hello? Everybody knows that the bird is the word.
Whether it's 1924, 2024, or 2124, we've always known that you are driven by your sense of safety and well-being. It is what drives us to see you through from start to finish, from small to big. And in the last 100 years, as you have evolved, so have we also expanded to serve you in many ways. From cradle to grave, with expertise in insurance, life, pensions, properties, health, and for those beautiful, memorable goodbyes. It's 2024, and in all our markets, our pedigree is recognized, our strength respected, our expertise valued, and our solutions sought by all who desire an advantage in life. Experience the time-tested and truly trusted 100 years legacy of Ghana's oldest insurer. Take charge of your future now. Insurance, life, pensions, property management, funeral services, health insurance. Enterprise, your advantage.
This be me, Kobe, aka Kobe Boga, KB for short. And this is my sweetheart, Obahima. Today, I get big surprise for her. Charlie, gone are the days I couldn't spoil my girl. Now I'm engaged to the woman of my dreams. Don't just look at my success. To get here, I had to follow the process. Out of nowhere, I lost my job. But I believe in humble beginnings. I got an idea that I knew I could grow. I started from a small setup, then invested in growing my own coconuts. I then grew my product lines. Now, I sell to many supermarkets in the country. Fellow young Ghanaians, trust the process and keep hope alive.
Take advantage of agri-business through the Ghana Grows program. Ghana Grows, Hope Day.
Welcome back to Springboard, your virtual university, and to this interesting conversation with my friend Jessy Agyepong, talking about nature, socialization, and nurture, or putting in the hard hours to find yourself. And for everyone listening, watching, or experiencing Springboard in any form today, finding yourself is a big conversation that you need to have in order to use Jesse's words, break out of the confusion of your life and chart your path, starting from the basics, the physiologicals, and climbing through all the way to the point of self-actualization, the point he calls home. If you don't know what that means, go back to the beginning of this conversation and find out what home means and how it feels like to arrive there. But before we went on the break, Jesse spoke about working under a boss who threw him into the deep end of the pool. And he talked about the fact that he looks back at that time as the most important time. He actually gave 30% of his development to that period working under my brother, Myanmar Asian family. So let's pick up from there, Jesse.
Yes, sir.
You talk about it and you pay glowing tribute to that point in Kinafam as a turning point in your career development. Recently, I was having a conversation about Ghana and about raising the critical mass. And somebody sent in a question and said, so what if you have a boss who does not like you or who doesn't seem to like you and is always tough on your case?
Yeah.
So inspired by that, I'm asking you, at the time when you felt, I mean, we all are playing your 50 cents music and everything. Now you say, where's the report? I mean, what kind of life is this? And then the next time, lock you in the room and say, in a month's time, I want a report as to whether you even helped to do it or not. You didn't mention, but at the time that was happening, did you like him? Did you feel that he was being fair?
So I didn't think it was fair. Man, I'm going to give you an example, very short one. So Nyama liked beans a lot. And everything he did to me was a lesson, but I didn't see it as at the time. I really hated some of the things he did. So Nyama says, cut the beans, brim. So I go to Nyaho Clinic. There was a beans joint there. I buy beans, and he liked his beans, zomi, cocoa, and gari. When I bring it, he would say, zomi no one some kaje fufu, brim. I walk back. I say, what the hell? It's just zomi. Following time, he sends me again a cut of beans, brim. Then when I go, I'll take extra zomi just in case. When I come back, he would say, cocoa no one some cut of fufu, brim. I was like, Charlie, bro. What do you want? Then I'll bring it again. It happened a couple of times. But the third time when I went, I realized that when I gave him everything he wanted, he would find a reason to look for something else. I didn't understand the lesson then. So the last time he did it, he sent me to go buy him beans. And he always gives you more money than you might need. So I went there, I bought 2 sets of the food. And I hid one in my office. And I gave him his own. Then he would call, Koto, plantain, extra brim. Then I come back in 5 seconds, I give it to him. Then he would smile. Zomino, and then I go to my office and I bring it to him. And he stopped it. And he laughed. And he said, what lesson have you picked from this? I sat down and I was quiet. And those days I used to be a little bit emotional. So like, not emotional in terms of like, he said, I'm teaching you how to anticipate your boss and what he might need next. Anticipating the person's needs is what would make you stand out. So because you know that I would always ask you for A, B, C, D, it's your job to ensure that they would always be on my desk or in my kitchen or in my cupboard, even before I ask it. This is not about beans and plantain. It's about the concept of predictability.
Let me stay with beans. I mean, you just have opened a box that could literally explode. I mean, no, serious. Yeah. So what? This lesson, is it not applicable to a person who now is their own boss?
Yes, it is.
And how does it apply?
My father a long time ago would ask, I was very small then, asked my brothers, what is the greatest enemy to mankind? And I think my brother Lord said, poverty. My father said, you're correct. And this was a key conversation over here. So my father said, the reason you go to school is because when it's time for you to show you've gone to school, you can put it on the table. The reason you work to make money is that in the future, if you need money, you would find it. So the reason we are doing all the things we are doing is that the future might demand of us the things we learn today. Mm-hmm. So it's important that if the future for the CEO would require that you do A, B, C, D, you do it today and keep it there. Being able to predict what might happen next or anticipate what you might need next is what might give you the comfort when that future or tomorrow arrives. So it's absolutely important. It's not about beans. It's not about gari. It's not about zomi. But it's about, one, being able to anticipate the needs of your line manager. Being able to go beyond the anticipation of your line manager. Being able to predict what the business might need and finding solutions ahead of time. what did I do with this lesson in my time growing up in the corporate world? And I'm going to give you the Tigo example. My charge to my team is this: if I can predict what you're about to tell me, don't come and tell me, because then I've already thought about it. And I've always believed this, that the CEO shouldn't be the smartest person in the business. The directors ought to be more smarter in their respective fields than the CEO. So the finance director must know more than the CEO.
Somebody's about to lose their job when you finish making this point. No, please be very aware that you are just about to let somebody lose their job. Say it again.
The CEO need not be the most smartest person in the business. In fact, there's nothing wrong with those below you knowing. They have to know more than you. And here's the point. If you're the CEO, the legal director ought to be more intelligent and smarter than you on the law than you. Finance director, same. Commercial director, same. HR director, same. So that when they sit in front of you, they help you make informed decisions.
So when you are CEO and you know more about the
It's a problem.
The area you're paying some...
It's a problem.
So what should you do?
To be honest with you, bottom line, either the person needs training or fire the person. Because you see, that it gets irritating to the extent that if the CEO is more read, more knowledgeable on new HR trends than the HR director, then what value are you bringing to the CEO?
But that's the reality.
Yes.
In a lot of cases.
And it has to cascade down. Directors also, below them are managers and senior managers. Those managers, within their given fields, and if it's finance, the person in charge of collections must be better. You get what I mean? So each person is better. In that instance, when you sit at the table with your talents that you've incubated, and I'm talking about the disruptions now, the officer in charge of collections ought to be allowed to speak out, to express themselves, to be confident. The same way you allowed me to be. If disruption happens at every layer, the whole system moves forward. But when you have bosses who have a problem with outthinking, outboxing, or suggestions they have not contemplated, then it becomes a problem. And you've asked a very good question. You said, what do I do with that? Or what do we do with it? And how did I break free with what I had found? I called it disruption. So everywhere I have worked, there's been what I had called positive disruption. Because,
just to let you know,
yes,
our next conversation, you and I, will be about three things.
Yes.
Disruption, reinvention,
okay,
and resurrection.
Disruption, reinvention,
resurrection.
Even better. Okay.
The resurrection of the dead.
Yeah.
Team, Springboard team, please book it down. Conversation number 2 with Jessy will be about disruption, reinvention, and resurrection. Because if I stay with this team, we will not finish the first team.
Yes,
so
yes.
I promise you will have a full show on that.
Yes, sir.
Because there are teams I would like to explore in that space.
Agreed.
And I'll tell you why that is very big for me.
Agreed.
Back to where we were on beans.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yes.
I want to exhaust that point.
Beans and Zumi.
Beans and Zumi and Gary.
Yes. Yeah.
And Coco.
Yes.
So the CEO must then be able to anticipate
Yes.
the customer needs
Yes.
and the board and their needs, the external stakeholders and their needs, the market and its needs. And so it goes even beyond your immediate boss from the employee point of view.
Agreed.
That predictability or that ability to predict can be extended way. The government can appreciate the
Yes.
needs of the electorate
Yes.
or the constituencies that they serve.
Absolutely.
And that lesson is applicable across board.
Exactly.
Let's move on to a very, very big theme. So now you found yourself, you think you know who you are, but you're a small fry in a very big lake.
Yes.
How do you engage your value proposition and magnify it to the point where you can't be left out of the conversation? I'm not talking about empty hype with no value. How do you ensure that you are in every conversation as the leader or as the one who gives the highest value in your field?
I want to talk about Mumbaism, referencing Pastor Mumba. Unfortunately, within our corporate or political or social networking environment, we're at a point where we equate two things as value, from my point of view. Those who speak confidently are perceived to be delivering value. And if you can't speak confidently, then your deeds must account for themselves. Either way, when you are in that room, you have to be noticed. It's absolutely important that when you sit in that room and you believe that you are home with experience and with confidence, there's nothing wrong with being heard or proposing an idea. The challenge is this, that typically, and again, I need to borrow a very wrong term. The average Ghanaian, we've been nurtured to sometimes be overly humble, overly quiet, and sometimes leave everything to God and hope that something might happen. But when you sit in that room, you need to understand that your life's journey has been curated by God all the way through to that particular point. So if you feel strongly about a view, be heard. Second, the average of us is always afraid of rejections or somebody saying no. Because for example, you might be in a meeting room and you're talking and you're speaking about the new propositions for enterprise group. Sometimes you might speak and they will all listen and nobody speaks back to you or comments on what you have said. It doesn't mean that they didn't hear you. So if you speak and nobody gives you feedback, it doesn't mean that nobody heard you. Sometimes they've heard you, but they might be waiting for the boss to react to you. And if the boss wasn't paying attention, it will slide. Go ahead, still be heard. So that when they are solving a problem and they're looking for people to be in a committee, they might say, this committee should have Reverend Albert because he's brilliant at this factor. Or this committee should include Boss J because he's brilliant at this. But if you're not heard and you don't speak out and you don't put your value on the table and you are hoping to be looked for, I respect the fact that there were times when something might look for a David and bring the David to the table. Those things don't happen all the time.
But let's stay with David. I mean,
Yes.
when you come to my area, you are tempting me. I mean, let's face it. When David went, Goliath had been shouting
Yes.
for a long time, and
Yes.
all the guys were hiding.
Yes.
David asked, what shall be done for
Yes.
the one who will kill Goliath?
Yes.
And the brother said,
He spoke out.
Oh, yeah. Shut up. He says, why? Is there not a cause? The Bible says he turned to the next person and shouted even louder.
Yeah.
What shall be done?
Yeah.
So he articulated his value position.
Perfect.
And he was brought to Saul and he defended his position before Saul.
Perfect.
So you're right.
In that moment, just go back and say, when I was driving, when I was pushing the truck, when I was hustling, look at my life. I was earning 200 cedis. Now I'm earning 12,000 cedis. Where am I going next? You have to be your own motivational speaker in that room and break the door. So I've always said it, and I've always opined that first, understand your value. And when it's time to put your value on the table, to speak up, to contribute, not every value requires speaking up. For those who are coding, code up. For those who are walking, walk up. For those who are dancing, dance up. For those who are bungee jumping up.
Let me stay with the same
Yes.
theme and talk about moments of truth. Moments of truth.
Yes.
Again, the question somebody sent to me online recently in one of my presentations, and it just happens to coincide with this. And so the person says, somehow I do well, but every time that moment where the decision maker is listening, the big person who could change my life is listening, somehow I fumble. By some strange coincidence, that is the day I fumble most. I suspect that I'm speaking for many people watching and listening today who say, when the cameras are not there, I perform.
Yes.
When the light shines and they say 3, 2, 1, action.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I just mess up.
Agreed.
And I had a friend who will always, in discussion group, dominate the discussion with the brilliant ideas. When they say exams, the moment they say start work, he will have nervous fits and collapse in the exam room. What do you say to those who just can't come to the party on the big day, the big match day? Players who play some small match, Champions League match, then they fumble. What would you say about that?
I'm going to say, who are you when the greatest motivational speakers, some of them require placards to be hung in a room for referencing? Who are you when some presidents require teleprompters to speak their thoughts. Who are you when some of the greatest preachers in this world will write their message down so they don't forget? If the greatest speakers sometimes ought to write their thoughts down or do presentations for referencing, note your ideas down. So in one of the training sessions that I did recently, I spoke to this issue. I said, if you feel that you are in a place where your confidence is weak and you can't put your thoughts together when people are around, write your thoughts down. When you raise your hand, you should say, I've got a solution to what we are discussing. With your permission, I would like to read the solution. There's nobody will be stopped from reading a solution. If you can't speak extempo, which is what the greatest communicators will do. No, I think we need to paint the building blue because blue corresponds with the skies and the sky is blue and hey, they'll clap for the cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha. But some people also ought to read your thoughts and write it as you wanted to say it. Say, so earlier today, I was considering suggesting that the color blue be used to paint the building. And may I pass my thoughts around for you to consider and share your thoughts around? And say blue is a magical color because it disappears with ease for A, B, C, D, blah, blah, blah. Let them read your thoughts and read your thoughts. There are people who lack confidence to speak in public. Nobody barred you from reading it. Because speaking in public, if you miss the idea, your brain, if you chewed it, and it's supposed to be enterprise group, your advantage, and you go and say springboard advantage, now the brain says, what am I saying? And somebody says, I told you can't speak. Then somebody will even sneeze naturally. Then the body says, Charlie, no. Then suddenly, you go to freeze mode and your hand is shaking. To solve that, write your views down. Number 2, I always say to people that we need to learn to shoot from the hip.
What does it mean? People
don't have too much time. So sometimes, like when I see people engaging with leaders and they say, Mr. President Albert Ocran, thank you very much for the opportunity given to us. You're doing very great. And when I was coming, I was telling my wife that I appreciate what you're doing. So, Mr. President, thank you very much for the opportunity. And then, so my question is, bro, what are you doing? So by the time you get to the question, the President Albert Ocran says, Charlie, my guy, what are you doing?
Say something or get out the mic.
So if you're dealing with a boss or a leader who is a bully, who doesn't want to give you what you're looking for, such people sniff fear. So when they sniff fear, they can either be cocky or ignore you. So if you wake up and say, Rev, thank you. I think the office space is too small for us and we need to find a way. People respond in particular ways if those asking the questions are sure of it, unless you're meeting a leader who has time to listen to you, to appreciate your difficulty in speaking, and who might even help you build your thoughts.
So you need to know the leader you're working with.
You need to know the leader you're working with. If your leader is one who is careful, patient, and will listen to you, but in that meeting...
Where does culture come in? Because I was talking to somebody who had done US, South Africa, and Ghana. And she was saying that when she got to Susan Quist, I think it was, when she got to Ghana at first, she found a cultural challenge because in South Africa, you say it straight.
Yes.
Here in Ghana, you must start and you must build a case.
Whine it. And it's like we are sparking a generator. See, I worked with Lakochi in Guinness. Typical classical Kenyan guy. You know, the Kenyans speak very slowly. Yes. They don't speak like Nigerians, they don't speak like South Africans. But the Kenyan will make his point. He probably might say, this Springboard Roadshow program, I think is number 2 in the world. If you cut him, he might stop. But he will come back to it again.
As I was saying.
The Nigerian will say, Charlie, the Springboard Roadshow is really good. We need to put money inside and go on. The Ghanaian would say, I've always felt the need to speak. You get what I mean? Because we are very courteous, but there's nothing wrong with being courteous. But understand where you are. If you were in a 1-hour meeting where ideas are being circulated, learn to shoot from the hip. There's nothing wrong with shooting from the hip. And I've always had a concern that sometimes when I do these public engagements and I go to campus to speak, Like recently in my church, I spoke on the church as a product. And somebody raised their hand and said, I had a question. It says, so I said, question time. Then somebody raised their hand. I said, good, you, good. Then the person says, so I have a question. And I'm saying, stop.
No, stop right there.
Stop right there. Sit down again. I'm going to start again. When I say, do you have a question? You raise your hand, ask your question. Typically, we feel we always have to preempt what we are saying and set a foundation for it, but we gotta move.
What's the topic for our next discussion?
It's
Disruption,
resurrection,
reinvention.
Yes, and then the last one is resurrection. Yes,
it shall definitely come to pass. It shall definitely come to pass. And Jesse, I've enjoyed this conversation for its authenticity.
Thank you.
It's a real conversation. I have a feeling that many of my viewers and listeners can relate very much. And I tell you what, we've broken this down into a few thoughts that one cannot afford to miss. The first being that the journey of discovery starts from the place of confusion as you navigate the options open to you, which options are often influenced by where you find yourself. You try to chart a certain path that sounded like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, starting from the physiological, climbing all the way to self-actualization. And then you went to talk about the 3 levels, starting from 2, ended up in 3 levels of influence that determine who you become.
Yeah.
First, nature. And then you went on to nurture or social influence.
Yes.
And then you went now to the hard work, the graft
Yes.
of building capacity in those areas. You talked about the influence of Nuyama on your life and the fact that in those moments where God sends your way a leader who can influence you in the nurture space, it's not always fun.
Yes.
But it's when you look back after years that you see how much it shaped who you have become.
True.
Then you've gone on to land with the idea about when you find yourself in the space,
The moment.
how to get noticed, and the fact that you need to be confident to make your point. And you said that in doing that, don't start taking the gun out and say, I have shot you and now you are about to die and you are dead. You say, shoot from the hip and shoot one touch.
Yes.
I tell you what, I am sure that everyone listening has found something that they can chew on. But as I always do, for the person who is fumbling with a mistake, fumbling with insecurity, fumbling with confusion, in that place you mentioned earlier on,
Yes.
it will be worth our while to give that person a minute of your time. So look in this camera and talk to that person who's navigating their way through a maze and give them some direction or some hope that they also can find their place that they call home.
So nobody, in my view, can motivate you better than you. And where you find yourself today may not be where you want to be, but make the best of it. The decisions you make might be difficult, might be tough, but understand that 1, you have to survive to make the decisions. 2, connect easily. 3, speak up. 4, if you can't speak up, send messages in people's inboxes. If you need somebody to chat with, you can send me a message on Facebook. And 5, don't be afraid to hear no. No never killed anybody. So just put yourself in the pathway to be heard. And in my view, you would find yourself soon. And if in doubt, come to the Springboard Ratio Foundation and start a conversation here.
Thank you very much, Jesse. Thanks for making time to come by for this conversation. And let's commit to the next conversation.
Yes, sir.
Definitely about disruption and about reinvention, and very importantly about resurrection, because I believe that there are themes that will be very beneficial to many people whose lives have been disrupted by either COVID or by circumstances that they did not anticipate.
Agreed.
And even in the regular journey of our lives, there are some disruptions that can be so major that you need ideas about how to put your life back together again. So let's do that another time. Right. So my name is Albert Ocran, and I would like to encourage you to continue this conversation online. I mean, Jessy and I are very active online, so let's continue talking about them. Which of the points that you raised connected with you? Was it the beans and the gari and the sending twice for each of the elements? Or was it the nature or the nurture or the graft? Let's continue this conversation online as we explore how to find ourselves. This has been Springboard, your virtual university, brought to you by the Springboard Research Foundation and proudly sponsored by MTN Ghana and the Enterprise Group with media support from the Multimedia Group and the Graphic Communications Group. My name is Albert Ocran, saying God bless you, and God bless you.
He's a turnaround. Whoa, turn around.
Turning point, yeah.